Hello folks, welcome to another tutorial in this Call of Duty style loadout system tutorial series. In today's video, we're going to take a look at how to set up the actual loadout component and also to set up a simple test to see if the weapon change and also our equipment changes are happening in real time. This is a very quick tutorial and also a simple one to follow. Again, if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to drop it into the comment section and I will get to it as soon as possible. And if you have come this far in this video tutorial series, I kindly request that if you haven't already to subscribe to the channel so you get notified when the next video gets released. And also, if you can hit that like button, that will definitely help my channel grow and that will help me to make more and more videos just like this. I really appreciate your time and let's get into the video. Let's get started. So we have to go ahead and create a new folder and name it blueprints. And this is where we'll be keeping all of our functionality blueprints. Let's open this up. The first thing that we're going to create is a structure. And we're going to name this loadout struct. Inside of this structure, this is what's going to define a loadout. So we need to have several components in here. And we're going to name this primary, first one, and make this of type as weapon info. This is our primary weapon info. And the second is going to be our sidearm. We're going to make this of type sidearm. Next is going to be our melee weapon. Make this of type melee. And after that will be our lethals. Let's make this lethals. Tactical. We can make it plural. And this is going to be of type tacticals info as tacticals info. Next is going to be our perk. This will be perk 1. Let's do that because we're going to have 3 different perks. And then this would be of type perks. And 2 more variables, which would be perk 2 and perk 3. So if I go perk 2, this would be perk 3. And this would all be of type perks info. Now this is how a loadout is going to be defined. So a loadout will have a primary weapon, sidearm, melee, lethals, tacticals, and 3 perks. So that's why we created this new struct with all of the other structs. Now let's go ahead and create a blueprint component. And this is how we're going to be handling all of our loadout system. And this is going to be attached to our character. So I'm going to go to our blueprints and create a actor component and name this BPC underscore loadout system. Open this up. And the first thing that we're going to do is create a variable and name this loadout struct. Make this of type loadout struct that we just created. And instead of this being a single, we're going to make it into an array type. So this way it can hold multiple loadouts. And also we're going to determine how many loadouts the player is allowed to have. So I'm going to go ahead and say get loadout struct and drag off of this and say resize. And here I'm going to put in 5. So that'll give me a total of 6 loadout slots for the player. I'm going to actually let's make this into a variable. Let's promote this to a variable and name this loadout size. And we can make it instance editable and also expose on spawn. This way you're able to go ahead and the player is able to go ahead and increase their loadout size as needed. You can always create a cap and then make it so that they can only have a maximum of 10 loadouts and such. But you need to define what their custom loadout is going to be when they first see the loadout. So for that, we're going to go ahead and create a quick function. Let's create a new function and name this setup default loadouts. In this default loadout, we need to have an input and we're going to name this index. And this will be of type integer. This index will be used to determine which loadout is being edited. Using this function, we're going to have to set up our primary, secondary, melee, lethals, tacticals, and everything. So we're going to go ahead and create multiple inputs on the setup loadouts. So I'm going to create the first one and name this primary. This is for our primary weapon, and we're going to set this of type name. And then I'm going to add a second one and then name this secondary. And the third one would be our melee. Next is our lethal. And next would be our tactical. And we have our 3 perks. So I'm going to go ahead and make this perk 1, perk 2, perk 3. Now remember, this is only for the default loadout setup. Every time the player unlocks a loadout or for the first time they open the loadout screen and they see the loadouts, this is how we're going to set up our default loadouts. This would not be the function that I would use to update the loadouts and save. That would be a different function. This is only to set up our default loadouts. Now I'm going to go ahead and create a sequence. So I'm going to right click and search for sequence. And I have a sequence node. Alternatively, you can always press S and then click, and then that will give you a sequence as well. Now for the sequence, I'm going to connect the setup loadouts to my sequence. And off of this first pin, I'm going to say get data table row. This will be the row, not the row names, row. And the first one I have is the primary. So I'm going to go ahead and search for my weapons database. And I'm going to plug this row in here. And same thing, I'm going to copy this and then paste it. And now I'm going to select the secondary, which is on my sidearm, and then connect my sidearm into this. And I'm going to do that same thing for all of them. Melee, I'm going to select the melee and then plug this in. Then add a pin on the sequence and then connect this in here. And I'm going to copy and paste this one more time. And this would be for my lethals. There it is. And then again, add a pin, connect this pin in here, and then also connect the lethals to this. Copy and paste this data table again, data table rows, and then make this into tacticals. And this one, we would go ahead and then connect this here, add a pin, and then connect our tacticals here. And the next one would be our perk data. And I'm going to go ahead and connect the perk one in here and also pin, execution pin. And then this one, I'm going to copy and paste it twice because it's the same perk data that we'll be using. So for perk 2 and perk 3, we will be using same data table, but it would be on two separate pins. So I'm going to have 2 additional pins and then plug this in here. So that's how it would look like. You have all of your primary, secondary, everything set up, and then you would notify which weapon needs to be set up in our loadouts, default loadout, and it will go and retrieve that row from your data table. We're using this as a sequence because we want to go and get all of this done in a row. And then the final sequence is once this is all done, we want to actually build our struct. So what we want to do is we're going to get our struct here. And we're going to drag off of this and say set array element. And this would be off of our pin number 8. So we're going to drag our pin number 8 and connect it to our set array element. And also our index that we're sending through, we're going to go ahead and connect our index in here. And this item, I'm going to drag off of this and click on make loadout struct. And then when I do the drop down, I know the weapon data is going to be my primary. So I'm going to connect it to my primary. Sidearm is for the sidearm. Melee is for the melee. Lethals is for the lethals. Tactical here. And then perk 1 and 2, 3. We're going to go ahead and connect it up here as well. Perk 1. Perk 2. Perk 3. So this is all the code that we're going to use to set up our default loadout. This is all that it's going to do. We can now close out this function and then go to our event graph. After our resize, we're going to go ahead and drag the setup defaults on top of this execution pin, and that will connect it. Now for index 0, we want to now define what is the weapon that you want to set up as your custom default weapons. This is where you have to go and notify which data table row you want to use on this. To make this easy, what I have done, and I will show you here, in the datasets, you go to your lethals and then open up the lethals. Usually the name is set up as new row 1, and so stuff like that. So you're going to go ahead and name this lethal underscore 01, the first one. And the second one, if you double click on it, you can rename it, make it lethal underscore 02. And then any other lethals you add, just add to this name structure, and then you will be able to get lethal 04, lethal 05, and stuff like that, right? And then you will just name the next one lethal 03 and such. So what this allows you to do is in your loadout system, in your lethals, now you can go ahead and then put in whichever lethal you want. So that will be lethal underscore 01. This is how the data table row works. So you do have to use a name and you have to type it in. There's a lengthier process of kind of using a drop down menu. This would require you creating an enumeration and managing that enumeration along with your data table. That's a very lengthy process. This is much more easier. And you just need to determine which lethal you want the player to start with, and you will type it in. And same thing I'll go back to my second data set. For melee, I'm going to name this melee underscore 01. right? And this will, I only have one knife. So here I'm going to go ahead and type that in, melee underscore 01. And then I can go ahead and close our melee data and then go to my perks. Here, perks, we're going to go ahead and say perk underscore 01, and then same thing, perk 02, perk 03. That's what we're going to name this. Perk underscore. Again, you can choose any naming structure you would like, but if you make it like 0102, it will be much more consistent. You can even name this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You don't have to say perk 01, perk 02. As long as you remember which one is which, that's all that matters. So in here, I'm going to go ahead and say perk 01, and then perk 02, and also here, perk underscore 03. Next is our sidearm. If I go to my sidearm table, I'm going to go here and then name this SD underscore 01, SD for sidearm. Actually, we'll name it SDA just to keep it a little bit more distinct. Secondary, right? So it will be SDA underscore 01 and so on. And then next is my tacticals. I went ahead and I named my tacticals as tactical 01 and tactical 02. So here I'm going to go ahead and set this as tactical underscore 01. And then I'm going to close this out. And then last is I've already went into my weapons data and I have named it the AK-47. I named it as a AR for assault rifle, SMG for SMG, LMG, SG for shotgun, and then SR for sniper. So for the first one, I want to have the AR. So I'm going to go here and name this AR underscore 01. Again, like I mentioned, you can just put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 if that makes it easier for you. But I've decided to just name it with the actual class itself as well. So it's just my personal preference. And that will be of index 0. What this will do is it will set up the first loadout slot with this weapons and this tacticals and melees and everything as such. So if I copy and paste this, and if I line this up here, I can now take this AR and then make it into an SMG, right? And then the lethal 01, I can make it into a lethal 02. The tactical 01, I can make it into a tactical 02 because I have 2 tacticals and 2 lethals. I don't really have 2 melees or knives. So for now, I'm just going to leave it as it is. And also, I'm going to go ahead and change this index to 1. So this will be my loadout slot number 2. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this. And then again, index, I will make this into index number 2. Instead of SMG, I think I have LMG after this. So I'll put LMG. Again, just to make a little bit of difference. The lethal, I'm going to go back to the first lethal and leave the tactical as it is. And then copy and paste it one more time. And this one, I'm going to name this into the shotgun. So that will be SG01. And I'm going to change the tactical here to 01 and then the lethal back into 02. Again, I'm just trying to show some variation. So physically, when you see it, you will see that difference of changing. And the last class that we have, is going to be, don't forget to change this index to 3 and then in this index to 4. And change the index to 3 here. And then now copy and paste this. And again, change this index to 4. And this would be my sniper. So I'm going to put in SR. Tacticals, I'm going to leave it as it is. And that's our 5 loadout classes that's set up. And in your game, if you're planning to give the player more than 5 loadouts, you just need to make sure that you already have a default setup for this. And then you just need to index it at 5 and index 6 and so on and so forth. So if the player has like 6 or 7 loadouts, then they already have this default loadouts set up in there. So it doesn't show up blank. So this is what we're going to be using for our default loadout setup. So now we're going to have to go and notify our loadout scene to make the change according to what the actual loadouts is. To do that, we're going to use an interface to do our communication. So I'm going to go ahead and create a blueprint interface by just searching for interface. I should get a blueprint interface. I'm going to name this BPI underscore loadout. In here, I'm going to name the new function as setup scene. And inside of this, the input is going to be our loadout struct. And then also will be the type loadout struct. That's the structure that we created. We can save it and close it. We don't need that anymore at this time. We're going to go back to our loadout scene, loadout system, loadout scene, and open up the blueprint. In here, we're going to go to our class settings and then implement our BPI loadout interface. What this will do is it will give us a interface function now that we can actually utilize. So if I right click over here and if I say implement event, I now have the setup scene. I can drag off of this loadout struct and then say break. And then this would give me our primary weapon, secondary weapon, and all the information from each and every single loadout. Now we need to convey this to our loadout scene. To do that, I'm going to use some functions. The first function will be named update primary, right? So this one is going to have an input. This would be input, name would be primary, and then the type would be S weapons data. This is how we're going to be communicating and updating our scene. Let's go ahead and make one function for each and every single component before we actually do the code. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this update primary and then name this update sidearm. Here, update sidearm, I'm going to name this sidearm. And also this would be s underscore sidearm info. Okay, we're going to compile. Now I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this. And this would be our melee. The input name would be melee, and we're going to make this of type melee. Now I'm going to copy and paste this one more time, and this would be for our lethals. This is our lethals, and also would be the type lethals. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste the lethals and then make it into tacticals. And this would be of name tacticals, and this would be of type S tacticals info. We're not going to be setting up the perks yet because the perks has a little bit of a different functionality than everything else. So we're just going to stop here for now. And then what I'm going to do is in my update primary, I'm going to go ahead and drag this and then say break weapon info. And now I have all the information from our data table. Now, if I go to my construction script, if you remember, we actually set up our relative transform and our static mesh. We can just copy this function and we can paste it into our primary here. This is still, again, the main weapon that we're setting up. And then we just need to drag our mesh here and then also the transform here. And now we can click on this actual break and then hide unconnected pins, and it'll get rid of everything else that is not relevant. Right? Again, you can do the same thing manually. So if I go to my sidearm here, I can go ahead and grab the weapons secondary and then say set static mesh. And also drag off of this and say set relative transform. Connect these two, drag off of this, and then say break. Mesh would be connected to the mesh, transform will be connected to the transform, select the break, and then hide unconnected pins. And then connect this update sidearm here. Right, same thing. You can copy and paste it, or you can just, do it manually as well. So next is our update melee. I'm going to go back to my construction script and then copy the melee function here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy these two, bring this in here, and then connect it. Pull this back, and then let's go ahead and break our melee, and then get the mesh, add the mesh, transform, add the transform. Click on this, and then we're going to say I hide unconnected pins. Compile it, and then we can close the melee. And then lethals, same thing, go to our construction script. There should be lethals right here. Copy this, and then we're going to paste it. And drag off of the lethals here, and then say break. And this would be our mesh connected here, and then also our transform connected here. And then I'm going to unhide unconnected pins. Tactical, same thing. I'm going to go to the construction script, copy our tacticals, and then paste it in here. Connect this, drag off of the tacticals and say break. The mesh would be connected to mesh. The transform will be connected to transform. And then select the actual break and then hide unconnected pins. So now in our event graph, when the interface function fires, we want to now call in all of these functions and update the scene. So I'm going to grab this update primary and drop it on this execution pin. That'll automatically connect it. And then the sidearm, I'm going to go ahead and connect it here. Melee, I'm going to connect it here. Then we have our lethals. I'm just going to drop it in here, and then tacticals. Right? I can select all of this, and now when I press Q, it will line it all up. And here in my break loadout struct, the primary, I'm going to connect it to the primary, sidearm to the sidearm, melee to melee, lethals to lethals, and then tacticals to tacticals. And again, we're going to come back to the perks in a different video. But for now, this is what we're going to be doing because all of these share the same common functions. The perks is a little bit different. So we're going to take care of that separately. So that's basically it. Now, if you want to test this out, this is how you would do it. You would go to, again, this is only for testing. We are going to have this entire functionality using our widgets, but for the time being, to make sure that it works, I'm going to go ahead and create a keyboard. event for the 1 key, 2 key, 3 key, 4 key, and 5 key. For now, just to check, cycle through all the loadouts. And I'm going to quickly create a new function and name this setup scene. And then this would take a index, because we need to notify which index we're actually building. And then also we need to add our component to our first person. So up here where it says components, click on add, and then click on BPC weapon loadout system. And then we're going to drag that loadout system here. And then off of this, drag and search for the loadout struct. So that will be the get loadout struct. And here we're going to go and get a copy. And that will be connected to our actual index. And off of this, we're going to say get all actors with interface. And this would be our interface function, VPI loadout. And I'm going to just right click and then say setup scene. And that would give me a message. I can go ahead and now connect all of this. And the loadout struct, we're just going to plug this in here. And that will give it the information. Again, this is only for testing just to see how it works. And now we will go back to our event graph, and then we need to now plug in this event. So setup scene, I'm going to go ahead and plug this in here. And this one would be index 0. This would be index 1. Let's go and set up this one. This would be index 2, 3, and then this would be a 4. Now we also need to do one more thing. Go to your content drawer, go to your loadout system folder, go to the loadout scene, and let's go ahead and drag that loadout scene BP into our scene here. And then now let's press play and test this out. So if I go up to the table, there's nothing here because we haven't really defined our construction script, what needs to be there. But if I press 1, you'll notice all the weapons, the melee, and everything shows up and it's in the right position. If I press 2, you notice the SMG and the tactical and the lethals changing. And then here's your LMG, your shotgun. And if I press 5, you notice that the sniper rifle shows up and it's in the perfect position. And our tacticals and melee is changing as well. I can continuously keep swapping between different loadouts just by pressing different buttons and such. So now we know our full loadout function is working. So folks, that's it for the video today. We have successfully created our loadout component. And this is the component that we will be using alongside our widget to actually do the loadout setup. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video where we'll be actually starting to do our loadout UI. Thank you again for coming this far in this video series. I appreciate all of your time. And have yourself a wonderful day. Catch you on the next one.